All right. All right. So last time we talked a little bit about culture and does culture matter and why it should matter and did it matter to Jesus and did it matter to Paul? And is that it?
And how they made adjustments for the culture
right.
that the people that they're communicating with were in.
That's right, yeah. And before we kind of move on to this next section, because I want to kind of get into, well, because we were just talking about something that a lot of apologists probably aren't sitting around talking about, but what we were talking about is how hip-hop is a reflection of what's going on in culture, and we see this through different ways. But before we talk about that, I mean, it's probably important for us to get on the same page of what culture is. So for people watching, how would you define culture, just kind of broadly speaking?
I think I'll quote my good friend John McCrae, that culture is whatever the norm is, whatever's normal.
Yeah.
And that sounds super bland, but for me, normal is, oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to go to my car, I'm going to go drive to Safeway and go buy whatever I want with US dollars, and that's all normal. But if I lived in a different country, maybe I don't have access to a car. Maybe they don't have supermarkets. They have local markets, and the currency, the language, the marketing, everything else is going to be different. And that for them, that's the norm. That's normal.
That's actually really good, because that kind of made me think about Brett Conkle and John Stonestreet in their book. They define culture, or they kind of give a
parable. No,
yeah, parable. Yeah, I keep forgetting that word. Like a parable, though, like an ancient parable where they say if you want to, they compare culture to the saying. They say if you want to know what water is, don't ask a fish. And the point behind that is, to a fish, water is normal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he's not going to probably be the best person to tell you about it, because he doesn't really know anything else. And it's something similar to that when we think about culture. What's normal to us today in this culture that it wouldn't be for other cultures?
Yeah, and even we have enough subcultures here in America that we can relate to, like Gen Z, millennials, baby boomers, Gen X. These are different subcultures that understand the world differently. They have different work ethics. They have different understanding of how the internet works or how money functions or investments.
Yeah.
And it's even right here where we live, we can see those differences, and communication functions differently.
Yeah, which is super interesting. So kind of getting back to what we were going to talk about. So we were talking about hip hop and how it kind of, and you can see this through all kind of musics, all different kinds of music, how they kind of influence what's going on in the culture. So I want to say that like different music genres kind of represent the face of what's in different subcultures, but it's the same theme that runs through all these different genres, because when we say culture, without getting too confusing here, when we say culture, we're talking kind of broadly about where the world is today, you know, or where at least in America, at least we're talking where things are today.
And what subculture did hip hop relate to?
Yeah, so for hip hop, it's primarily for the black subculture, for black people, and so that kind of makes me think like when I was young, Tupac was very, very important to me as a person, right? Tupac meant a lot to me young, and I think he meant a lot to the black culture. And even that's a shift. I mean, even starting from Tupac died in I think 96, something like that, and even from that point to today, you can see through hip-hop how culture has changed since then, right? So for example, like with Tupac, I mean, the reason I personally like Tupac and he meant a lot to me is because he was really empowering. It actually, for the first time, he made me feel comfortable in identifying with people that I felt like I was part of. So it was like the black community, right? Tupac was somewhat kind of like a spokesperson for, a lot of people saw him this way, at least for the black community, because hip hop was an expression of the black community, what they were going through, their struggles, and you know, and it gave you kind of a voice and empowered you to want to fight against oppression with your group and who you thought you belonged with.
So through his music, he was able to communicate a message that led you to feeling empowered.
Yes. So it was like the message was important back then. It was the message that made me feel empowered, right? And that's why when people say Tupac was the greatest rapper to ever live, they don't mean he was like, he had like the dopest flow or, you know, lyrics, or it wasn't about that. It was about the message that he told. And that's what they mean about when they say he's the greatest rapper to ever live, you know.
And was that pretty common in rap and hip hop?
Yeah, historically, I'd say yeah. And so what's interesting is you see a shift now, because it used to be all about the message, right? And then that would lead to the feelings. But now, and we see this through so many other ways. We talked a lot about postmodernism and stuff like this, and history and stuff like this, because we even see it with the church. But now it's changed where it's more about the feelings, and the message isn't really that important.
So you're saying that it used to be, in hip hop, it used to be a message that was connected to feelings, and now we just decided to take out the middleman. We said, nah, we don't need a message. All we need are these feelings. So
that's right.
We don't need to understand where we come from or where our identity is in order to have those feelings. We just kick that out, and now we can just have music that generates those feelings without having any content.
Yeah, that's right, and you're more right than you know, because I think that's part of the reason why now you got rappers. And this is the thing too, is people are always like, what happened to hip hop? Because now you got people who aren't even talking about anything, right? But the words communicate a feeling, and the feeling is like a feel good feeling, right? A lot of the time. So you have these rappers like Pitbull, and I think Pitbull, personally, I think he's probably one of the worst rappers ever to ever exist. And I know a lot of people probably like Pitbull. That's fine. Just
why?
Don't invite me to his concert.
So what makes him bad compared to Tupac?
Well, because he's not talking about anything, and it's not about.
Oh, come on, he has to have something.
I don't want to
in
be
his
too
music.
critical, but I'm saying for me personally, I feel like his lyrics, like he has a line where he says like yabba dabba do bedrock. You know, I mean, if you think about like Tupac's lyrics and some of like these people from the past, you know, they had this strong message to pull. Now there's no longer a message, and it's no longer about even the art. You know what I mean? It's just all about the feel. So the whole shift has kind of changed, you know, and I'm not bashing on any of these new rappers or anything like that too, but because that's all beside the point. The point is that how it's kind of shifted where people no longer care about the message. It's all about the feeling. So you can look at most of the top rappers today, and they're just fun rappers that make people feel good in some way. So now it's that it's the feelings rather than the message that's important. And at first it was the message that would lead to the feelings. Now it's just the feelings. You don't even need it to lead anywhere, just to make you feel good.
Well, wait, does this mean, are there any rappers left or any guys in hip hop that still have a solid message?
Not in the mainstream. I mean, there's people that are still rapping and giving messages and stuff like that, but they're usually not mainstream.
Really?
Yeah, they're more underground and stuff like that too. And people, I mean, that's what's so bad about it is I don't know a whole lot of them because you don't hear about them as much. You know what I mean? And you have people like I think Joyner Lucas, who's a really talented rapper that talks through stories. But I think part of the reason why he's not as popular as he should be is because he's talking about stories and talking about stuff that actually has a message and has a meaning behind it. But people don't want that anymore. And this is why people are always like, what happened to hip hop? But we see this in everything too, right? We see this in art. We see this in, I mean, even in practical stuff in culture and communication. Now it's no longer about a message for things. It's all about the language that conveys a feeling. It doesn't matter about how precise the message is or the story or nothing like that. It's using words that convey a feeling that make people feel a certain way, and that's all that matters.
So you're saying music is now only about a feeling and no longer about a message?
I'd say by and large now, I'd say the feeling has trumped everything else by far.
Huh.
Yeah, and I think pretty much generally speaking, I'd say it's at least mainstream music is no longer, or for hip hop at least, it's no longer about a message. It's all about a feeling good, you know, partying, good time, feeling empowered, feeling individually empowered. So the individual has money and women and, you know what I mean, and all these other things, and violence or whatever is all about me. I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. And that's kind of the message and culture we get. We say, yeah, just do you. Don't worry about what anybody else says.
Oh,
like that.
Right, because stories will say you should do this or you shouldn't do this, or this is good and this is bad, or this rapper is awesome and I'm awesome and these rappers are terrible.
Yeah.
But we have less and less of that and more of, well, this is a message that just makes me feel good and that's it.
Yep. Because the more context you add, the more I want to say the more layers that are added on, and then it becomes more confusing. You know what I mean? I think for people too, or whatever, because that's why you see in debates and stuff like this too. People don't want to talk about. You kind of get deep into the weeds. They want to just have it just completely polarized. You know what I mean? I'm thinking kind of more politically and stuff like that too.
Dude, so it's even like memes now.
Yeah.
Memes, all they do is they might say something, but the real idea that gets conveyed is a certain feeling. It's not what the words actually imply.
Yes, that's the challenge with my channel, right? Is because I always have to watch that, because I realize that when people read these memes, they're not reading the facts and then being like, oh, this fact is what informs my opinion about religion and all these other things. It's not that. The memes are primarily good with rhetoric. That's the main thing. So the facts don't matter. So I could literally respond to all these memes with just facts, and it wouldn't communicate to the people that wrote the memes.
And why doesn't it communicate to those people?
Because that's not the language they're speaking. They're not speaking the language of facts. They're speaking the language of feelings.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that's also what hip-hop is now doing. It primarily speaks the language of feelings.
Yeah.
And so there's no room for a message then.
Yeah, there's no room for the message now. And I'm willing to bet that this is the same case with country music and other genres. You know, I haven't spent a whole lot of time listening to a whole bunch of stuff lately, but that's what I'd be willing to bet it's a similar thing, because country's historically been telling about stories about something that people could relate to, as far as I understand. But I remember, like, because my wife's from Nashville, so here and there she'll put on the country radio or something, and before I jump out but I hear, I mean, there was a song, gosh, I shouldn't actually say, because it's probably a popular person or whatever, and had these weird lyrics about
nothing,
yeah,
and it just
honky
conveyed a
tonk,
feeling.
pinky donk, or all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I'm assuming that it's probably the same kind of thing, because I mean, we could even think about this in terms of the abortion debate. I mean, any kind of hot topic today, you'll see the sides that are doing the best are the sides that use rhetoric for the most part. I mean, because they're conveying feelings. And so it's like going into a debate on something like abortion, right? And if I'm going into a debate about abortion and I'm only giving facts, so if I'm saying, well, scientifically, the embryo, you have this, it's life, it's scientifically life, and all this kind of stuff. And then the other person on the other side saying, I'm fighting for women's rights, no one should tell a woman what to do with her body. These things communicate to how culture already thinks. It's simple and it sounds moral, right?
So it feels good.
It feels good. That's right.
It doesn't really have any philosophical content to it.
No.
So arguments are more like current day hip hop then.
Yeah, which is, I never thought I'd say in my life. Yeah, that's right. No, I mean, that's the whole point, is that you have these different cultures. So you have subcultures within culture. So you have like the black culture, you can split it however you want to split it. You've got, you can even call the left a culture, or, the right a culture, and all these different cultures, this kind of thing that runs through all the different cultures today. I'd even say church culture is something similar, because the common thing that runs through it all still comes to a personal feeling. And that's what, and these are conveyed different in these different subcultures, but the theme is the same. And so that's what's kind of, I mean, we think about even church music, right? Worship music. How has that shifted?
It seems like we've gone from hymns where we're talking about our understanding of who God is, to songs where the focal point is us and how we feel.
Yes, because
so praise and worship sounds like hip hop.
yeah. Well, you think about how romantic the lyrics sound now, because they're personalized, right? Like it's like,
and it focuses on how we feel, or how we feel about God.
How we feel about God, and how God feels about us. It's just that kind of focus where, and the point behind this is that historically, I'm not an expert in praise and worship history or whatever, but I'm thinking that historically it was probably more about the group, and not necessarily what God can do for our feelings, right? It was more how we can serve God rather than how God can serve us.
That makes sense.
Makes sense? So I think for the next video, the last kind of segment we'll do, what do you want to talk about?
I think we'll end up talking about if hip hop tells us that it's about how we feel now and not so much about the message, how in the world would we make an adjustment for that kind of change in culture? If we look at Jesus and Paul and see how they made adjustments for culture, what do we do with this?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So maybe we can call this one "Feelings Don't Care About Your Facts."
I like that.
All right, so yeah, let's do that.